Hello everybody, and today we have with us Buster. This is Buster, the 2-year-old. He's not small, he's rather large, and he loves to play and he loves to be petted. Today he's going to join us for the story, The Old Chest. So let's listen to The Old Chest while we watch Buster. You okay? I think so. The old chest belonged to Granny, and no one was allowed to lift the lid unless she was there. She polished it herself, and it was so shiny that she could have used it for a looking glass, if only it had been smooth. Instead, it was covered with carving, flowers and trailing leaves, and queer little faces peeping out where you least expected them. Sometimes Nora tried to count those faces, but she always lost her way before she reached the end and had to begin all over again. Are you comfortable? He loves being petted. She loved the old chest just as much as she hated sewing, and that was very much indeed. So she looked grave one afternoon when Granny asked her if she could hem a duster. It was a plain blue check, not in the least interesting. Besides, she was feeling rather unhappy, and the reason for that you will hear later. I could, she said. But must I? Granny shook her head. You shall do just as you like. I don't like dusters, said Nora slowly. Very well. I promised Mary she should have these tomorrow, but I can do them myself, I expect. She put on her spectacles, looked for her thimble, and began to sew. Nora walked over to the window and watched the clouds, which were hurrying across the sky like a flock of fat sheep. They were as white as the thread Granny was using, but the sky was a much prettier blue than the duster, and she did not want to look at the chest or play with feathers, the grey kitten, or do any of the things she liked as a rule. Presently, she came back and sat down on the hassock with a bump. I'll help, she said. Granny showed her where to begin, and she set to work with a new needle from the ivory elephant which held them in its back. Sometimes she pricked her fingers, and sometimes she sighed, but the stitches went in all the same. And at last 2 sides of the duster were done, and she gave a bigger sigh than ever. Such a sigh that Feathers jumped out of his dreams and left the room in a temper. Granny looked at her with a twinkle. If you do that tomorrow, Sylvia will think a baby breeze has come to her party instead of a little girl. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to it, said Nora, and swallowed down a big horrid lump which had come into her throat without asking leave. Granny was surprised. Not going? But Sylvia is your special friend, and I thought you were sure to be there. I can't go without a fancy dress, Granny. You have the pretty fairy one you wore in the school play. That's just it, said Nora, and 2 tears splashed on the duster before she could stop them. I was trying it on this morning, and Brian upset the ink down the front of it, and there was no time to order another. She was even ever so sorry But please, Granny, I'd rather not talk about it. Granny pretended she had not noticed the tears, and she said no more until the duster was finished. Then she went to the chest and threw back the lid. Come here, she said, and she lifted out the prettiest dress Nora had ever seen, white muslin with little rosebuds scattered over it. There were 6 frills on the skirt, one above the other, and a pink sash to match. The rosebuds matched the rosebuds and the pink ribbon to tie the short sleeves. Try it on, said Granny. Nora slipped it over her head and it came down to her ankles, but it fitted her exactly, and when the sash was tied, she looked as if she had stepped straight out of one of the old pictures in the drawing room. Would you like to wear that at the party? Asked Granny. It belonged to my mother when she was a little girl. Nora clapped her hands. I'd love it, but suppose I had an accident and spoilt it, Granny. That would be dreadful. The little girl who put such neat stitches into a duster and didn't like will take care of the dress. I know, said Granny. Then she smiled. Besides, I think the old chest must have meant it for you. He has kept it hidden all these years. I shall like him better even now, laughed Nora, and she waved to him as she danced out of the room. So she went to the party after all, and everyone said that her dress was the prettiest there. Well, wasn't that a nice story? Yes, Buster? I think he agrees. He loves being petted, as you can see, but he's a little impatient. I hope you'll all join me tomorrow for another story, and maybe we'll see a new cat. Buster, say bye-bye. Oh, bye-bye. Okay, good night.